My name is Anna Muhammad. I'm the Equity Director and Food Access Coordinator for NOFA Mass. I live in Springfield, Massachusetts, which is the seat of the Pecumtuck Nation, right here in Western Mass. And as I mentioned, you are attending session 3, our 2 p.m. session on DIY cultured vegetables, increases immunity, mitigates stress, and supports a healthy gut-brain connection. And our presenter today is Priscilla Espinosa. I'm here with Rafi. Rafi is our co-pilot with me today. And so glad to have Rafi here for the conference. They've been a great help. Before we get into my introduction of Priscilla and her team, just a few housekeeping items just to go over as we're in this world of Zoom. So Rafi, you can go ahead and advance the page. So as we mentioned, you may have heard that I named the land that Springfield actually was at one point. We want to take this time to have all of us join in the native land acknowledgement of our Indigenous family. We at NOFA Mass, we work to make our racial equity statement a living document that consistently guides our work. In the interest of reconciling the harm that white supremacy and all forms of discrimination has and continues to cause in the food and agricultural system, we are asking all of our conference participants, chapter members, to act as allies and accomplices to BIPOC organizations and communities. And we've listed some suggestions of how you can provide that level of assistance. So first, provide resources to on-the-ground BIPOC-led organizations that are working to feed their communities, especially in this very terrible time of COVID-19 and the food insecurity that we're seeing across the country. Examples of those organizations are Gardening the Community in Springfield, Sprout Change in Worcester, the Urban Farming Institute, and Oasis on Ballou in Boston. Those are just a sampling of organizations that are BIPOC-led that you can assist with resources. Work on personal bias. The Food Solutions New England has a 21-day racial equity challenge that starts in April. We'll put the link in the chat where you can go on, get more information and start to sign up. It's a great tool to assist with that. And then lastly, support organizations like the Massachusetts Indigenous Legislative Agenda. And that website is maindigenousagenda.org. We'll put that in the chat as well. And by doing these things and working together on what is right and actively dismantling racism in ourselves and in the food system, the Commonwealth can truly feed everyone in the state. So please keep that in mind. So our wonderful sponsors have given a lot of resources for our conference, and we are so grateful for their generous support. You're looking at the gold and silver ones right now. Please go into the electronic program book, click on the icon and go to the website, support our sponsors because they're doing so much to support our work. Visit the virtual vendors. They are also in the program book, and we will put a link in the chat to take you right there. They can provide you some discounts for conference goers. I've gotten some great discounts. A quick introduction of our wonderful, wonderful presenter today. This workshop is being given by Priscilla Espinosa. She is the founder of Sprout Change. Sprout Change offers a full circle solution to food insecurity and climate change that services the needs of the individual, community, and our shared ecosystems. She is also a newly elected NOFA Mass board member, and she does a lot of work with food insecurity in Worcester. So it really gives me great honor, privilege, and pleasure to bring Priscilla on. She's working with Duncan Drapeau. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name okay. So they will be presenting today. So with nothing further from myself, Priscilla and Duncan, you all can take it away.
Thank you. Thank
No
you,
worries.
Anna, for the wonderful introduction. I'm very happy to be here. I just want to share a little bit of housekeeping myself. I am logged in twice. And so when I do the demo part, if you want to look, for those who are more tech savvy, you're welcome to, look at me presenting, but you could also see my hands in motion and get a close up of what we're doing. I want to also do an introduction to Duncan Drapeau, who Anna mentioned. Duncan, can you please introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Duncan. I'm the intern at Sprout Change this year, and I am also currently a senior at Clark University in Worcester, Massachusetts, and I'm studying environmental science and policy there. So thank you all for coming.
Awesome. So at some points in the presentation, Duncan's going to be taking over, and so you'll be seeing his lovely face and hearing him as he supports this presentation. And so now I'm going to share my screen to get the presentation started. So welcome to Sprout Change. Sprout Change helps you sprout change using food as medicine, natural remedies, and herbs. Our social mission is to empower everyday people to become autonomous with their overall health. And our vision is for Sprout Change to become a global transformative grassroots movement that not only helps you, it also helps everyday people transition to healing foods diet, lifestyle, and empowers us to regenerate our shared earth and natural resources in a resilient manner. Today's workshop is on do-it-yourself cultured vegetables to increase your immunity, mitigate stress, and support a healthy gut-brain connection. In this workshop, attendees will learn the benefits of cultured vegetables to increase their immunity, mitigate stress, and support a healthy gut, which in turn supports mental health, including optimal brain functioning. Cultured vegetables are truly a superfood, rich in living probiotics, vitamins, minerals that also support the entire body and nervous system. It is especially necessary to consume cultured vegetables on a daily basis to replenish probiotics as well as B vitamins that are wiped out due to chronic stress. So B vitamins, we continuously need to replenish them. Attendees will also learn how to culture their own vegetables using an anaerobic fermentation process. Traditionally, fermented vegetables use an aerobic fermentation process, which involves wild yeast in the air. And since Western diets are very high in yeast, I personally feel that it's best to follow the anaerobic fermentation. That way we have more bacteria in our cultured foods than yeast in our cultured foods. And this supports a healthy gut microbiome. And the great thing about cultured vegetables is that it's very affordable and anyone can create their own superfoods at home. It's shelf stable. And so I like to do it seasonally, year round, and I, change up the ingredients based on what's available. And this class is great for people of all ages. My nieces have helped me, and so I hope that you too can have this started in your family and with your loved ones of all ages. I would like to share a disclaimer. Everything I'm presenting today is for educational purposes only. It's not a substitute for medical advice. It's just information. And so anything that I share on my media outlets while I'm campaigning, at workshops, during one-on-one consultations is only for general information, and it's not intended to provide medical advice and should not be relied upon as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. So before I can really talk about the importance of having cultured vegetables, I wanted to just paint the landscape for us. You've attended a full weekend at NOFAMAS discussing food security, food insecurity, food sovereignty, as well as what to do about climate and the dire state that we're in now with the pandemic and this crisis. And so I'd like to just share a little bit more about the work that we're doing with Sprout Change, solving food insecurity and climate change. And the numbers have gone up. These statistics were just from a couple of years ago. So because of the pandemic, food insecurity has actually become worse. And so we have about 10% of Worcester County and also 10% in New England who are food insecure. And we believe that the numbers are much higher now. Also, climate change we believe that climate change is going to increase the risk of hunger and malnutrition by 20% by 2050. And this could actually be a bit higher if people are not as resilient with their food sovereignty. Other issues that we're dealing with is, the depleted soil. And when we have depleted soil, I'm sure you've heard about this in this weekend's workshops, your foods, your plants are not as healthy. We have the climate change, we have food insecurity and accessibility because of food deserts, and we're losing our knowledge that used to be passed down from generations to generations on how to prepare healthy foods and how to preserve foods in general. And so today's focus is on cultured vegetables, which is one way of preserving your foods so that you can use it year round. 1 in 7 households with children cannot afford to buy enough food for their families, and 1 in 4 who are food insecure are unlikely to qualify for most federal nutrition programs. And so we're looking at this dire situation to really think about how cultured foods could be a small scale accessible solution for everyday people. And as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at almost 10% for Worcester County and statewide of food insecurity, as well as in New England. And you can see the data here for the rest of New England. And in the US, it's also hovering around 10%, a little bit higher than in Massachusetts. And women are even more susceptible to food insecurity than men. And then another thing that's really concerning is that nutrition isn't even taught in medical school. So less than 1% of medical school curriculums cover nutrition. So when you're thinking about our healthcare workers and our healthcare professionals for support on what can we do, the topic of nutrition, food security, diet, lifestyle, that's not a curriculum, and that's not in the curriculum. Why is it not in the curriculum? Well, you got to follow the dollar. Who's sponsoring? Who is the private funder supporting these schools? And so I'll leave that to you to become more informed, but that's the situation. That's the landscape that we're looking at. So we have food insecurity, and then we have professionals in healthcare who actually are not learning this. It's just not part of the curriculum. So you can't really blame the doctors because it's not in their training. The solution that Sprout Change provides is accessible. We're really working with urban settings. So we really want to look at small scale. What can an everyday person do? And so we have the concept of the no-dig garden, which is a small regenerative agriculture using permaculture methods space. And you could use it in a really small space, or you could even do it with container gardens where you're following a lasagna method layering process to achieve a no-dig, no-till soil bed. By doing this, you increase soil health. You actually support climate action because you're sequestering carbon from the atmosphere. You're solving food insecurity by creating food security. You're also creating accessibility. So people that are in food deserts or in urban settings that don't have access to healthy foods are now having access to healthy foods. And you increase consumer education. So you empower the individual. And these are some pictures from our social media on Instagram. This picture right here is at Hartwell Institute, a wellness center in Worcester, Massachusetts. And we have taught our full season no-dig garden workshop there. And then I'm sure many of you know that there are many benefits to touching soil. And so not only are you getting beneficial bacteria that function as antidepressants, you're also getting sunshine that also functions as an antidepressant, fresh air, which helps improve your overall health and well-being. We need oxygen. And so, so those are just some of the things. And you have physical activity, which we need movement, for our joints and mobility. And we believe healthy soil equals healthy food, equals a healthy planet and ecosystem, which equals healthy people. So this is a sample of what our No-Dig Garden workshop series looks like prior to the pandemic. And, I shared briefly previously, our No-Dig Garden workshop series follows a lasagna layering process for those who are not very familiar with no-dig gardening, and we have a picture of what you can achieve over time in 4 years. The quality of earth that you can achieve, the soil health in just 4 years. So from left to right, you see how the soil started, and then we have this nice rich humus on the far right. Our workshop series, we start off with building an evergreen garden bed, this everlasting bed, follow with companion planting. We teach on natural pest control and maintenance, and then we teach on garden to table. So Sprout Change functions as a full circle solution, as Anna mentioned. So we're teaching you how to grow. We're also teaching you how to prepare those foods so that they're optimal for your health. And this is my experiment garden. So I'm always experimenting, and I have this really micro food forest, really micro food forest. And I had even success growing tropical plants in it. I had to put them in the middle. So it looks a little messy, but it's extremely functional. And as you can see, there's lots of earthworms. So the soil's very happy, and pollinators are happy. So, and I don't mind the mess because I know what's growing there, and I know it's supporting the environment, and I know it's also contributing to my overall health and well-being. And if you want to learn more about our no-dig garden, and you're on Facebook, you can join our No-Dig Gardeners in Massachusetts group. We have about 162 members, maybe a little more, and we have also workshop attendees there. Now we're going to segue to the work that we do with organizational wellness. And this is a workshop I did at Worcester State University. And so with organizational wellness, I really try to help consumers be able to prepare their own healing foods, do herb use and combinations, as well as prepared natural remedies. And what I mean by natural remedies is natural remedies could be poultices, compresses, it could be hydrotherapy, it could be massage therapy, it could be aromatherapy. So different types of natural remedies and techniques that you can do to help you. And especially during a pandemic, these are very useful, or in case of an emergency, it's very useful to know what you can do, especially in your kitchen, to support yourself in case of an emergency, or in case you have bruising or swelling or pain. Top daily nutrients that I have identified that we need are omega-3 fatty acids, iodine, zinc, magnesium, vitamin D, iron, calcium, B vitamins, vitamin C, resistant starch, probiotics, prebiotics, which is fiber, and chlorophyll. And our Sprout Change top foods, superfoods, are nuts and seeds, rich in omegas, minerals, vitamins, herbs, rich in minerals and vitamins, probiotics, which need minerals and vitamins to proliferate. But normally when we source probiotics, they also have minerals and vitamins. Prebiotics, fiber-rich foods, for instance, like fruits and vegetables, leafy greens, that actually feed the probiotics, and chlorophyll, which is the green part in plants. And chlorophyll actually looks very similar as its makeup to our human blood. So the only difference is chlorophyll has magnesium and our human blood has iron. Seaweed, minerals and vitamins, contain minerals and vitamins, resistant starch, and fiber, which are in legumes, whole grains, taro root, green plantains, and yams, and high antioxidant fruits, which are berries, pomegranate, kiwi. Think of something that's tart and sour. And then our Sprout Change Herbal Blend, which is specially formulated blend of herbs. It's a herb powder, and I use it daily, and I give it to my clients to boost their immunity, mitigate stress, and support healthy aging. A little bit on omega-3 fatty acids. We have seeds, cabbages, cruciferous vegetables, beans, and leafy greens. Today's presentation is going to focus on cruciferous vegetables. So we're going to have cabbage, and I believe I have collard greens. So we're going to be using those, and that's a nice way of getting some omega-3, which we need for optimal brain functioning. And with prebiotics and probiotics, as I mentioned earlier, prebiotics, they help feed your good gut bacteria, and these are fiber-rich foods. And the probiotics are live microorganisms essential for overall gut health. And most of our gut health is, most of our immunity is actually started in our gut. So we want to really feed this microbiome to maintain high immunity. And probiotics are in cultured foods which are not pasteurized. So in the pasteurization process, you're heating things up. You actually kill the living bacteria. And so you want to make sure that when you're sourcing for probiotics, that your probiotic foods have not been pasteurized. And I have a client testimonial, Jorge. He had Crohn's disease and he had a lot of pain and he was losing a lot of weight because he couldn't eat foods. And I worked with him for several months and helped him learn what foods he could eat, how to prepare them, what natural remedies he could do, as well as herbs he could use and supplements, and did a complete customized program for him. And he's doing so well now. He went into remission. His gut doesn't even look like it ever had Crohn's disease, and he got a new lease on life. So that's a great testimonial, and it's been the situation for many of my clients where they've reached remission or they've been able to manage their health in a much less painful, less inflamed way. In today's workshop, we're focusing on what you can do yourself for your gut brain, and it's going to be on cultured vegetables. And so a lot of this work is inspired by the pioneer Donna Gates of the body ecology diet. She in the 70s also introduced stevia to the US. So we have to give her credit for having stevia that she sourced from China and introduced to the US market, and in the consumer market, because I'm sure a lot of people knew about stevia beforehand. And she has great YouTube videos. So these are going to be here and they're going to be provided later on in a handout. So you can click the handout for the link if you want to watch more information on how Donna Gates makes her cultured vegetables. I've adapted mine. So I wanted to give her credit because she is the pioneer when it comes to cultured foods. However, I'm sharing with you a completely different recipe, and it's adapted for Sprout Change and how I like to work with it. And the good thing about doing cultured foods is that you're creating your own superfoods. So the existing nutrients in the vegetables, they actually multiply 100 times. And not only are you multiplying those vitamins 100 times, you're actually creating probiotics. So we already have lactobacillus bacteria, which is plant bacteria on the vegetables, and you're proliferating that. And so you increase the beneficial bacteria, and you also increase the nutrients in the vegetables. I mean, how much more budget friendly can it be to make your own superfoods, And so this is my favorite way of getting B vitamins. And if I'm feeling sick or anything, I take a little bit of the brine from my cultured vegetables. I drink it like a shot and I'm good. I got my vitamins for the day, for probably the week, but I'll use it up. As a highly sensitive person, my nervous system is always mitigating stress. And so I have to continue replenishing. And that's another thing Donna Gates talks about, is that when you're under stress, you consume your B vitamins and your magnesium because your nervous system needs it. So we want to be mindful of consuming these superfoods on an everyday basis, because especially during a pandemic, our bodies are environmentally under stress. And so we want to be mindful of making sure that we have nutritious foods in our diet to be able to best handle the environmental stress in our life. I'm going to do a shout out for my mom, who has been teaching on sprouted foods for over 40 years. So I learned all my sprouting with her. I like to add sprouts to my cultured vegetables because sprouts are resilient, just like wild forage foods, they're resilient. And so I like to be able to add resilient foods into my cultured vegetables to really give it an extra kick, so that I can maintain my optimal health. And the nice thing for those of you who are really into this is that eating sprouts and living foods is anti-aging. And so because you're just getting those really strong nutrients and that extra energy that the plant needs to be able to grow into a resilient plant. So just a shout out to my mom, the founder of Germinemos, which means let's sprout in Spanish. And I grew up eating all kinds of sprouted foods. And my favorite thing that my mom makes are sprouted meatloaves. And it's sprouted lentils made like a meatloaf, but it's so tasty. It is plant-based, so there's no meat in it, but it's a wonderful way, a slow food. It's like my favorite comfort food, and she makes sprouted breads and sprouted crackers and also all these microgreens. So now we're going to have Duncan take it away. I'm going to be transitioning to the demo, which is part 2 of today's presentation. Just want to be mindful of time. So if I could get a time count, if anyone.
It's 2:30.
Oh, fantastic. We're doing.
Yeah, we have until 3:30, so you're doing fine.
So because we're doing great on time, I would like to maybe people can chat. I mean, speak out loud if they feel comfortable, and they could speak out loud to ask questions in real time, which I've done in my presentations. So Duncan, can you please take it away?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me all right now? Yeah?
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to actually share my screen right now. Can you see that all right? That's good. Okay. Awesome. So I'm just going to ask you all a series of questions while Priscilla transitions to her demo portion of the presentation. First couple of questions here, they're yes or no questions, and I would love if you could indicate your answers by pressing yes or no, which you can see in the participation icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you click on that, you should be able to see a little green check and a red X right there. I don't know, does everyone see that all right? If you go to the participation icon and click on that, it should come up with a list of names, and then beneath that there should be a yes or no, go slower, go faster, things like that there. Does everyone see that?
Duncan's talking about the participant button at the bottom. And when you click on the participant button, you'll see those, the no, the yes, go slower, go faster buttons that he's referring to. So it's the participant tab at the bottom of your screen.
All right, and if some people could just press, I see a couple people pressing yes right now that indicate that they saw that.
Excuse me, it's actually under the reactions button on the toolbar. So participant, it's not on my computer, it's not under participants, it's under reactions.
Sure, thank you for that. I appreciate that. So are most people seeing that right now? I see a couple more people buzzing in. I'm just gonna go ahead and ask the first couple questions here, and you guys can, if your video's on, you can raise your hand and respond any way you'd like. So the first question here, as you can see, is who here has eaten fermented foods? If you have, if you could just press the green check, that'd be awesome. All right, I'll give you a couple more seconds. Great. All right, thank you for doing that. And then we'll go to the next question. Has anyone here fermented your own foods before? And you could also indicate yes or no again, in the same area. That'd be great. Good, I see some more answers coming in. Thank you very much. Awesome. And then we'll go to one more question at the end here, which is a little bit of a bonus question. And everyone can feel free to either write in the chat or even unmute yourself and speak out if you have something to say about this. And it's just, who here knows the difference between cultured foods and fermented foods? So if anyone would like to chime in on that or have anything to say, that'd be awesome to hear. It's a little bit of a trick question, so feel free to, no judgment here on the answer. The Laura in the chat saying something about cultured is adding something to the veg. That is true. That's true. It's close. I wouldn't say that's wrong, but there's an additional part to the question. And then Mary is saying cultured uses a starter like sourdough. Examples of a culture is yogurt, says Kathy. That's great. Priscilla's going to jump in at the end and give a little more of a concrete answer to this question, as it's a little bit of a trick question here. She's almost done setting up all the answers.
I'm good, Duncan. Whenever you want to do the transition, if there are any more questions, they can ask now, and then I'll answer this trick question for you.
Yeah, all right, awesome. Yeah, I've seen some good answers in the chat here. It's very close. I'm going to let Priscilla answer the question now. If she would like to go ahead with that.
So the difference between cultured foods and fermented foods is there's really not any difference. The reason Donna Gates she didn't really coin cultured foods, is one participant said because you use a culture starter, you do. So that's one answer. The other answer is to distinguish between pasteurized fermented foods, which don't have living beneficial bacteria, and cultured foods, which are living beneficial bacteria. So for those of you, this workshop is really for those who are do-it-yourselfers, who want to learn how to make their own cultured foods. If you have an extra budget and you don't really have the time to make your own cultured foods, I have a wonderful suggestion for you to source your cultured foods. I personally love real pickles, and I have a bunch of real pickles here. I have the beets, the cabbage, the ginger carrots, the sauerkraut, and the kimchi. I love their products. I also love supporting local small businesses. And I source this locally from Ed Heider's in Worcester. And the nice thing about this is that this is a local company. So I love their products. So if you don't want to make your own cultured foods, don't worry, someone did the work for you and you can trust them. It's in the refrigerator section, and that's a big key to letting you know that it's alive and well. And so these are cultured foods that I'm already halfway through. I don't know if you can really see it, but if you're looking at the other camera, maybe it'll show here. But these have carrots, they have apples that I use as a prebiotic thyme that I got from a local garden, from my friend's garden, cabbage, and seaweed. The Duncan's showing the slide on, pretty much like a rough overview of the ingredients we're going to be using today. So I like making cultured foods in a 1/2 gallon mason jar, but you can use any jar you have available. I have had success making my own cultured foods in smaller jars. However, the recipe is for a 1/2 gallon. So, you just divide the recipe by the size that you can. You can also eyeball it. So you don't need a recipe. It's quite intuitive once you see me in action. So this one was cultured foods that I did with lemon and cranberries, carrots, and fenugreek. I love adding fenugreek sprouts because they're extremely high in minerals, and beneficial bacteria love minerals. So we're going to go over some of the things, suggested tools that you need for today. You're going to need a large bowl. Optional are probiotic capsules. I like using Mega Food. It's plant-based and they're wonderful. It is on the pricey side, but with one capsule, you can use it as a culture starter, and you can multiply it too. So I get it 90 capsules, and I've had the 90 capsules for a while now. Well, they're probably not 90 capsules anymore. You want a real salt. I'm using Himalayan salt, but you can use French marshland salt. So I don't remember what it's called, but I mean it's also has 80 plus minerals. This is from a marsh. I got it in France, so but I tend to use Himalayan salt because It's very accessible, or you can use sea salt. Sea salt just has like 16 minerals, and Himalayan salt and marsh salt, because it's in the middle of two bodies. It's between land, soil, and also, you know, a body of sea like ocean. So you're getting the minerals from land and you're getting the minerals from the ocean. So you get extra minerals, nutrients. You want some measuring spoons, but again, you can eyeball this. You don't need to be precise. You're gonna want to have a mixing spoon. Since I prefer to seal, we're doing an anaerobic fermentation, so I prefer to have this very airtight. I'm not a big fan of the plastic mason jar lids because they actually let air in. So what I've done to seal it really well, because with the metal lids, you get rust due to the activity from the beneficial bacteria, is I cut out little squares of plastic. And I know it's not very environmentally friendly, but I do reuse my my plastic bags that I learned to do from my grandmother, who's really into, you know, recycling things, upcycling things. So I'll use my recycled plastic, because once you use it, you kind of have to throw it out. You can't really reuse it again because it gets teared up. And then, or you could just use your metal lid and buy a new metal lid. As I mentioned, you can use any size jar that you have available. We're going to be using a 1/2 gallon mason jar. So I'm going to put this here for now. Optional, but it helps a lot to have a funnel. Put that there. Because you can customize this however you'd like, I'm going to customize this cultured foods with a little bit of mullein. Mullein, you can forage it, so it is wild. And mullein has the benefits of, one of the benefits is that it's antiviral. So it's wonderful for respiratory health, lung health. It's an expectorant, so you know it helps you cough out phlegm and reduce phlegm. So I love during this time using a lot of mullein leaf, so for teas. So I'm going to be adding mullein leaf. You don't need to. It's already a superfood just with basic ingredients. But for the purpose of this demo, I'm doing mine with mullein leaf this time to experiment. And I'm using cranberries. And I love the cranberry version, so I'm really excited when the fall comes and the winter comes when cranberries are available. I love making my cultured vegetables with cranberries. I have a really old apple that I haven't eaten from this fall, so I'm going to chop it up as a prebiotic. You know, it still has minerals. Maybe the vitamins are not as active. So minerals, you can't really deplete them. They're pretty stable. I have some carrots that I've already pre-chopped up, like half moons, so I just cut them. I didn't peel them because the outside has already some beneficial bacteria, so I just cut them into like half moons. My Fenugreek Sprouts, and I like sprouting them because as I mentioned, when you're sprouting, you're actually eating resilient foods, just like having wild foods. And so I have some sprouts, and I also have some more sprouts. So I'm always trying to sprout, especially during this time, because that's one way of making sure that I have active energy and active minerals and vitamins in my diet. So sprouting is a really accessible way of growing your own foods when you're in a pinch and your budget's a little challenged and you need healthy foods. I like traveling with seeds when I travel, because you never know if you need, that's how sailors would prevent scurvy, is by sprouting. They would sprout on deck. You didn't have any foods on deck. And so they would travel with, some, mung beans. Chinese sailors, I remember reading, would travel with mung beans, and they would sprout their mung beans and they would stay healthy, while there was limited access to living foods on deck. You're going to want some carrots, which I've already chopped up, and cabbage. And so the way you use your cabbage is that, and a scale. You don't need the scale if you're doing this by eye, And when you're doing it by eye, it's pretty much you just fill the jar with vegetables or fruits, whatever you have accessible to you that's available for you. And then you pour some water and the probiotic capsule or culture starter. But if you are measuring, I've given you the recipe. I like, for a half gallon, I found that 800 grams of product, vegetables and or fruit works really well for a half gallon mason jar. I also like it because I end up with a lot of brine. And this is just, if you want less brine, then you can add more vegetables. But I take this brine as a shot, as a superfood, whenever I feel that my immunity is running low and my body needs, especially if my nervous system is shot. And as a startup entrepreneur, if there's any startup entrepreneurs out there, you know life is hard. So I like making sure that I can stay resilient by taking my superfoods on the go so that I can manage, you know, the demands of the day and the challenges of the day. So we're gonna measure this. That means I'm gonna scale it. So because I am technically, you get to see the magic happen today. I am pretty much doing this recipe without pre-measuring. So I use whatever I have. I try to do a no waste kitchen, which means that I try to use up everything I have, stems and everything. In fact, there's more nutrition in the carrot leaves tops than in the carrot bottoms. And that's normally how it functions with, well, no, herbs is a little bit different because there's more nutrients in the root than there is in the leaves and the flowers. But there's different properties. So I'm gonna scale I'm gonna tear this to make sure that I know what this Pyrex container is, so that I know how many carrots I have, and that's gonna determine how much cabbage I need. So I have 67 grams of carrots and excuse me, I'm going to write this down, 67 grams. And now I'm going to find out how many cranberries I have. And I'll put this here. And then now I'm going to find out how many cranberries I have. Well, find out how much my apple weighs actually. I'm probably going to use the seeds anyways too. So it'll be a little negligible. So I have my apple is about 7.6 grams, so about 8 grams. And so that's going to go in here. I'll chop it up in real time. Now I'm going to tear this again, find out how many cranberries I have. I have 8.3 grams, 8.6. It's probably 9 grams with this. So so that's 9 grams. So when you're doing your recipe, you can just mix and match whatever you have available. And then, you know, predominantly is going to be cabbage or another cruciferous vegetable that you have. I like using cruciferous vegetables because they're actually best consumed steamed or cultured. So they're more digestible, and cabbage actually has vitamin C. So, you know, and then you can get to increase it when you're fermenting it, when you're culturing it. So I put 9 grams of the cranberries, and I'll put the rest in here. And then let's find out how many sprouts I have, fenugreek sprouts I have. Oh, 0.9. Oh, wait. I think I have it in ounces. So I think I did everything wrong. Sorry. Since I'm doing this in real time and I have the sun in my face. So yes, I'm gonna have to weigh everything again, but you get the gist of it, and it's in real time. So we have 24. It's 76 grams. So I'm going to try to get 80. That's about 80. So let's start again. My apple is 216 grams. Did anybody notice that my grams were off? I mean, we don't really use grams in the US, but I know if I was in Europe, my friends would be laughing at me right now. They're like, what are you talking about, 9 grams? So my apple is 216 grams. And let's see what I'll probably use a different container. I'll probably use a receptacle. Yeah, I'll do this bowl. I'll tear this. And now we can figure out. So I have about 326 grams. Let's see what the total amount is. I'd like to use these up if I can, because I don't really cook with cranberries, so I prefer to eat them cultured. 474 grams of carrots and cranberries. So between the apple and the fenugreek, I think we're going to have very little. Space for the cabbage. So I'll probably use collard greens. So it'll probably be mostly carrots, cranberry, and fenugreek. Or I can make two. I can make two. So I have 2 mason jars. I have 2 half-gallon mason jars. And for the sake of time, Duncan, can you please open your calculator and let me know, or anybody in the audience, 216 grams plus 474 grams, what do we have? And then subtract it from 800.
So you said 216 times 474?
Plus 474.
And then subtract that from 800?
Yes.
You get 110.
110. Oh, wow. So this is 84 grams. So this right now is about 100 grams. So since I'm going to double this, I'm going to pre-mix this, and I'm going to probably do 400 grams of this mixture. I'm sorry if I'm messing up all of the math, but I feel like you guys would understand what I'm doing. And so I'm going to, let's see how many grams this cabbage is. Perfect. It's about 842 grams. So between this mixture and this cabbage, I can do 2 half-gallons. So that's fine. I came prepared to do that. So I'm going to put this away. So I'm mixing this up, and I'm going to put this scale away. I probably will not really use the collard. I'll probably continue working collard greens. And put this away. And we're going to do 1 tablespoon of salt. I have Himalayan salt in here. I like using it in this container since it's very practical. I just upcycled it. So you want to add the salt. You can use a little bit more salt, but I feel like if you use more salt, it gets really salty. So for 800 grams, I like using about 1 tablespoon. We're going to do 1 tablespoon of seaweed. I use kelp. but you can use, and make sure that it's not like nori seaweed. I mean, I guess you can use nori seaweed, which is already processed. Make sure it's like actual like seaweed. This is the brand that I'm using. It's from Maine. But you can use like an Asian version if you'd like. And I should have a small piece in here that I've already cut up from previous workshops. This is where the scissors
Priscilla,
are handy.
Deb asked if you wanted to use 2 tablespoons because you're doubling the recipe.
That's so smart. Yes, thank you.
Thank you,
That's
Deb.
exactly what I need to do since I'm doubling the recipe. Thank you for following. This is great. So this is like teamwork. So I'm going to put this tablespoon actually in here so that I can chop it. So I like chopping it long ways and then cross way to get little cubes, little squares. But it doesn't really matter how you chop up. And so I learned using seaweed from Donna Gates, and seaweed has iodine in it, and iodine is antiviral. So not only are you getting minerals, well, lots of minerals, iodine is a mineral, but iodine is antiviral. So, you know, we're making an antiviral superfood, which is beneficial during these times. So it looks like I'm gonna need way more seaweed. So I'm gonna chop up this one too. And the nice thing about making cultured foods is that if there's any pathogens on the vegetables, like let's say like from me touching them, I mean, the beneficial bacteria actually eat up the pathogens. So, you know, that's a nice thing about preserving is that while they're fermenting, they're not only proliferating and becoming more, it's also in the preservation process, it's also eating up and killing pathogens. And so you're conserving food, and you're also killing any cross-contamination that may have happened. They are delicate, so you really want to make sure that it is an anaerobic fermentation, that it is airtight. You want to make sure there's a container on the bottom, because as it's fermenting, it's like carbonated water. It starts to bubble up and it will pour out. So you want to have a receptacle underneath to catch any of the fluids that are coming out. And you want to make sure also that you refrigerate it. So it's shelf stable until open. So as long as it's airtight and it's away from sunlight, well, right now for the sake of the presentation, it is exposed to sunlight, but you want to make sure that it's not in direct sunlight when you're fermenting it. So what I like to do is I take my receptacle. If I don't have storage in my kitchen cabinet, you take a reusable shopping bag, you put the receptacle in the reusable shopping bag. You put your cultured foods that are gonna ferment in there, and you put the shopping bag somewhere so that it's not exposed to direct sunlight. And it takes about 1 week. And if you're in a hotter climate, it's gonna be ready probably in 3 or 4 days. But if you're in a colder climate, especially if you're not using heating in your winter home or in a winter climate home, it might take a week. So, and if you're in Alaska or somewhere really north in Canada or Scandinavia, maybe it'll take 2 weeks. But I haven't done an experiment in Alaska, so I can't really tell you what the conditions are. So, but here in the Northeast, it takes about 1 week in the wintertime and about 4 days in the summertime. And so thank you for the reminder to put an extra tablespoon in here. And there we go. And we mix this all up. So now we have like our base, and you can make whatever. I like using dill because dill is really good for the nervous system. And I'm highly sensitive, so I really need to use everything I can, all the nutrients I can to support my nervous system. We are using mullein, so I'm gonna keep that here so that I can remember. I like, after doing this a bunch of times, I like adding the capsule absolutely last. And I'll show you how I chop up my cabbage. And let me see if I have any spices that I want to use. So I have some purple dead nettle. So if you forage and you like to save, you know, purple dead nettle also has wonderful properties that are good for your immunity. So I'll add a little bit. You know, it's gonna multiply. So if you have any spices and herbs, it doesn't really have like a flavor profile to it. If anything, I feel like it's a little musky. And I'm gonna add some dill because I really like the flavor profile of dill. Some people are not very fond of dill. So if you're not a fan of dill, then use oregano. Just be really mindful on the spices. I would say that if your spice has a very strong flavor profile, use half a tablespoon or a teaspoon, because even the taste will proliferate. So everything enhances in the fermentation process. So unless you really like a strong, and if you're using something that's antibacterial like garlic and oregano, don't use too much of it, because then you're not going to have a lot of activity with the bacteria. You know, so you kind of want to follow yin yang, you know, like a balance, like, you know, balance it out. So if your herb is antibacterial, then, you know, be minimal. And actually, one of the properties, beneficial properties of purple dead nettle is antibacterial and antifungal. So I'm not adding too much. It's just to get some of the good benefits. And I have some violets that I foraged this spring. So I'm going to put some violet. The violet leaf is also really wonderful for lung health, and functions as a decongestant. So I'm going to add the remainder of my violets and my violet flowers in here. And I think that's all I'm going to do for my version, but you can do whatever you'd like to your version. I try to think, when I'm preparing these, I really try to think like, what's going to make me more resilient? What's going to boost my immunity? What's going to support my nervous system? What's going to support lung health, you know, respiratory health? So I think like this, or brain health. You know, if you have a certain ailment, maybe consider what's good for your ailment. You know, if you have heart issues, maybe consider adding cayenne pepper to yours. You know, if you have, I don't know, memory issues, maybe add a little rosemary to yours. So really think about, you know, what's good for your condition, and, you know, add that to it. If you have a lot of joint pain and swelling, maybe add some turmeric to yours. And so, you know, think like that. And that's what I'm trying to encourage in my workshops, because, you know, we've become so formulated with our recipes and so precise in these measurements that we've forgotten how to cook. You know, cooking was really something that you did based on what you had available, and you did it by eye, and you touched it, and you had texture, and you could smell it, and you could feel it. And so we need to go back to those basic home economic skills to be more resilient as a community, and, you know, maybe experiment a little bit more and explore a little bit more. So feel comfortable, know that maybe you're not getting the best taste out of this, but you only need a tablespoon per meal, and know that you're getting that. And if you really need to hide the taste, if you're not really into sour foods, maybe you can make it into salad dressing. You know, I like doing that too. So I'll take a tablespoon, put some oil and a little bit extra lemon and some salt and maybe a little bit of garlic. Now you have a salad dressing, and you're getting Cruciferous into your diet. So you're eating it with your salad, and so you don't really taste the sourness, because now it tastes like a dressing. I'm going to chop up. I have, we're running a little bit lower on time, so I'm going to now transition to chopping up the cabbage so I can show you what I do with my cabbage. One of the things that I've learned is that when you want to take the outer leaves out, so I've already sort of like separated them, because the outer leaf is going to function like a stopper. You know, for those of you who do ferment and who do traditional sauerkraut, you know that there's like a weight, like a stopper. You can use like a stone for it. But this could, if you're rolling up the cabbage, you have it like this, and you roll I like rolling the stem part, the thickest stem part in first, and then wrapping the other ones over it, and it creates sort of like a little bubble, kind of like making stuffed cabbage. And that's my stopper at the top. So you want to make sure you set aside some of the outer leaves to be your stopper. Now I do use a stem. I just cut the parts that are not so functional. Remember, this is being cultured, so at the end, you know, it's all going to taste the same, and it is still a part of the plant. And so I just chopped a little bit, and I do compost. I compost with city compost because I am an urban dweller, and I've been composting with them since they started. So I'm really very proud to support them. They're a local business, and they're all over the place now. I think they're in the Berkshires now, and even universities compost with them. So I like cutting mine halfway first, and then I end up with quarters, right? And then I do another quarter, because I like small bits. If you're into food processors, you can put it in a food processor. Donna Gates is really into food processors, so she gets like a really tiny, like really tiny cut. I'm not a fan of that tiny cut. I really like the long slivers, but you can do what's most practical for you, because at the end of the day, it's beneficial bacteria. So however you're getting your beneficial probiotics, you do that. And if you like your carrots grated, you can do that too. And I like cutting mine like this, like strips. And once it gets thicker at the end, I will cut it a little bit again, so that I end up with strips that are almost the same size. So you want to get things to be almost similar sizes, because that way it ferments at the same time, or rather say it ferments ferments like if something's bigger, the smaller items are going to ferment faster than the bigger items, is what I'm saying. So you want to try to make sure that the pieces are almost the same size. And once I get to these bits like this, sometimes I tuck them into this part, and then I'll blend them into something. So I still use it, because it's a living food. You don't want to cook it. So just remember that when you're serving this, you want to make sure that it's raw. And so I didn't have any bits there. This cabbage was about 800 grams. So I'm going to use the entire cabbage, and I'm going to just go 50-50. So why don't I start doing that maybe, and I'll finish this, and I'll put the cabbage in the glass bowl that I had earlier. After this presentation, I'm going to continue. I have another piece of cabbage. I'm going to continue fermenting. So I'll use this apple that I haven't really used. I do prefer, I'm not a big fan of fruits, so I really like sour fruits. So if the fruits are sweet, they may go unnoticed for me, but I do like putting them in cultured foods because it's a prebiotic. So it's going to feed the bacteria. And then also the sour taste on your tongue, it's an acquired taste. So it's good to get your mouth into having bitter foods and sour foods, getting your tongue tasting those things, because over time you actually start craving them and appreciating them. So don't be concerned if you're like, oh, it's not really my flavor profile. Know that you try it at least 7 times, at least by the 7th times, you might get acclimated to the taste. And if it's too strong, then make it into a salad dressing, because you need part fat and part sour to have a salad dressing. So now I'm going to show you how I put everything together so I can make a little bit of space. I did have some ginger here. So if you like ginger, you know, that's wonderful to use. So you can, you know, definitely use ginger. This was the collard greens that I had set aside. So I'll use this in my next batch. And I'll start putting these over here. Cabbage is also wonderful to have in your fridge at all times because, as I mentioned, it's rich in vitamin C. It also has sulfur, which we need for joint health and also just for cellular regeneration in general. And it has additional minerals. But the really awesome thing about cabbage is, and moms might know this, is if you mash it up, you know, like bang it up and bruise it, it releases a liquid, and that liquid is actually anti-inflammatory, and it's wonderful if you have bruising, joint pain, if you have swelling, people that complain about arthritis pain, they could just mash it up, put it on their knee or their hip and make a poultice. So I like having cabbage because it's wonderful for fermenting, making into cultured foods, but it's also wonderful as first aid in your kitchen. And so now I'm going to make sure that I'm going to measure to make sure that I have 800 grams to put into this mason jar, the first one. Actually, it's a little wet, so I'm going to put this on top. So I'm going to tear it. I'll tear it now. Great. And let's see if we can get about 400 of this. There we go. That's about 400. I'll put the remaining cabbage pieces over here. And normally we would mix this. So let me see if I can use another bowl. I think for the sake of time, I'm going to use the bowl I had, the receptacle I had to put underneath, and I'll just wash it after the workshop and reuse it. So I'm going to put this in here so that I can mix it with also 400 grams of the pre-mixed mixture that we made before. Great. You can use your hands, but I don't want to use my hands because I'm not in the kitchen, and then my hands would get sticky, and if I have to touch things and move things around, then I'd create more work for myself, because then I'd have to wipe everything I touched. So I'm using a spoon for that reason, but normally I do touch it when I'm in the kitchen, and I just rinse my hands in between. It smells great. I love the smell of dill. Like, I am just a dill fanatic, and I am really appreciating the nice smell of dill. Then we're going to place it in here now that it's mixed up, and I'll show you what the nice mixed up version looks like. Not sure if it focuses because of the light. I have a lot of light coming in, but very colorful. It's quite beautiful. And once it ferments, I swear the colors just pop. So I'm gonna start pouring it in. I'll just have to, I want to put my towel back, and I'm going to wipe the surface a little bit so I don't get the bottom of the mason jar too wet. This is just water and vinegar, so that I just made myself. And so, okay. Sorry, that was my timer to know how we're doing on time. And now we're going to start pouring this in here. Once we fill this up, we're going to add water. And because beneficial bacteria love minerals, you can also add mineral water to this. And you know, Donna Gates, she sells with her culture starter pre-formulated minerals that she has come up, but I'm sharing with you what you can do yourself, you know, like the most simplest way of, you know, help supporting your immunity so that you can manage your stress level in as resilient a way as possible, and also support your gut microbiome by introducing beneficial bacteria. And we have way more bacteria than we have even living cells in our body. So, you know, these little organisms really tell us what to do. So it's important to have the good ones, you know, in our system. I have some chopsticks here because sometimes they get a little stuck. You can use your hand. I'm just, as I mentioned, I'm avoiding the use of my hands so that I don't have to wipe my hands in between. So now we put the culture starter in there, and I'm using a Mega Food probiotic starter, and this is going to proliferate. You don't need a culture starter, it's optional, but I like knowing that I have all these different strains. I mean, I have over 10 strains of beneficial bacteria that I'm pretty much, you know, putting into here. And I put it with the capsule too, so I do open it. And then the capsule, you know, you take it in, so it's vegetable based. So I put the capsule there. Remember the stopper? We're gonna put the stopper on top. Now we pour the liquid, and we want to make sure the liquid goes to almost the top. It doesn't have to be the exact top. So I would say you want to make sure you have it at least at the first rim, the liquid. So I'm going to put half of my mullein tea. And I made mullein tea because mullei's really fuzzy. So when you get to taste, I've cooked with mullein before, and I think it's better to use mullein that's an actual leaf than actually the broken down, because then your food tastes a little fuzzy. So, but you're getting the benefits. It doesn't really mullein doesn't really have a flavor profile that I think of. So that's about half. And then I have some filtered water here. You want to make sure you're using filtered water, spring water, or mineral water. So make sure your water is chlorine free, because that will kill the beneficial bacteria. And I just fill it to the top ring. You can use sparkling water. If you're going to use sparkling water, I would say do about half sparkling, because then, you know, you're going to have a lot of carbonation. And this is already going to, you know, become active. You're going to see a lot of activity. It's so beautiful when you start seeing the bubbles and the activity. I would say that you have activity about day two or three. And and the colors are so festive. So if, you know, when you make this with, you know, year round, you can use whatever you have available. And especially if you add different colors, it's just such a nice treat to put on top of your salad, to eat on the side of your food, especially if you're eating foods that are not very wholesome. So you want to have some beneficial bacteria. And this piece of plastic accidentally got wet, so I'm going to use one that I have here that's dry. So you never know what can happen. So I came prepared. I set myself up prepared. And now I'm going to put the lid on top. And you want to make sure that it goes on top, inside a receptacle, away from direct sunlight, and leave it alone for 1 week or 1 year. I have some in my pantry that I made last spring with fruits. And, you know, I go through this until they're done, and then I'll open a new one. It's shelf stable as long as it's in, you know, and away from indirect sunlight until you need it, just like when you're canning or doing cultured foods or fermented foods. And because it's a living food, once you open it and the air goes in, you want to make sure that you put it in the fridge for storage, but it stays in the fridge indefinitely. And when you're serving it, make sure that you're serving it with clean utensils, because you can cross-contaminate it. It is living bacteria, so you want to make sure that you're always using clean utensils. You're not cross-contaminating with your utensils. And so as a visual aid, you have a container, you put it in the container, put it away from direct sunlight. And that, my friends, is how you make cultured vegetables.
All right, my goodness, what a wonderful demonstration, and it's a real-time demonstration. Priscilla, if folks have questions for you and also questions about any programming that you're doing at Sprout Change, they can email you?
Yes, they can certainly email me. I may be a little bit slow to respond since I'm going to be starting graduate school next week. And so I'm going to be doing transition, and I do have some upcoming events. So stay tuned with NOFA Mass, actually, because they're doing a Resilient Garden series, and I'll be part of that. So I'll be working with Russ Cohen, who's a local guru on foraging and herbs and wild foods and edible foods. And him and I are going to be doing a workshop together on April 6th. With NOFA Mass, and so stay tuned for details once NOFA Mass releases that information, to learn from us what we're using locally to help support our health and immune system.
And thank you for that shout out about the resiliency series. You will start to see that information on our brand new website in just a few days, along with the other webinar series, inspiring ideas from experts in the field. Now, we do have a minute or two for 1 or 2 questions. If there are any short questions that people may want to ask now before we go off the air. If not, you see Priscilla's email, you can reach out directly to her as well. So if there's any, we do have a question from Jess. Okay. Why don't you extract water from the cabbage first before, so you don't have to add as much water?
That you do that, and you can, but then you need to have even more cabbage. So this recipe is for 800 grams. If you do extract it first, which is following traditional fermentation, then you actually, this mass would probably become 1/4 of the size. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So when I've done workshops, there have been people that have followed the traditional sauerkraut method and they shrink their cabbage, but then they have to add more stuff because it doesn't fill up the jar.
Ah, okay. That was a great question, a great response. And question from Deb. When did you start using culture foods?
I would say probably 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. Before I was using definitely fermented foods, and eating probiotic rich foods. Yeah, maybe 3 years ago. And then I learned about, in my workshop on fermented foods, I used to have, so these workshops, cultured foods, used to be called fermented food workshops. And I would actually teach sauerkraut methods. And now I'm a converted cultured foods promoter. And the reason I promote it, just like I said in our class objective, is because we're already consuming a lot of yeast in our foods. A lot of breads, things we're not eating as many probiotics as we need. Bread isn't sourdough anymore. At least it's not the main bread. We're not doing slow rise bread. And so, and a lot of our foods that used to be, our diets used to be rich in fermented foods, and they're not anymore. So once I realized, and I do it for personal reasons, I'm highly sensitive, so I really need to be mindful of my nervous system and my mental health. And I refuse to stop my life, I want to continue going. I want to be part of events. I want to be part of activities. I want to go to school. I want to have a startup. And if I want to do all these things, I need to be able to give myself the nutrients I need to be able to do all these things. And that means I need to be eating very high probiotic rich foods consistently, a lot of minerals, a lot of vitamins. And because I'm a startup, my budget's extremely vulnerable. I tend to do a lot of things myself because I like to reinvest in my startup. And so in order to reinvest, that means that I need to make things myself. And so this is one way of maximizing, the mega food flora. So it becomes a great investment. And I like teaching these tools, these hacks to everyday people, because the biggest challenge we have with people is, I can't afford healthy foods. I can't afford organic. I can't afford this. I can't. And I'm saying, well, what if we reconfigure and relook at things and, you follow these techniques, now you can. So that's why I'm really excited to share with you what you can do to mitigate stress, increase your immunity, and increase your microbiome with beneficial bacteria.
Okay, very good. Excellent. And our last question for the day from Daniel. Does including alcohol with the meal counteract any benefits from this? So if you serve this in your meal and you have maybe a glass of wine or something like that, will it mess up any of the nutritional value?
That's a great question. I don't have a lab. I'm not a chemist. So I can't really give you a breakdown on what it means. And, if you're having wine does have bacteria, but it also has yeast because of how it's fermented. It's fermented with an aerobic process. And so what I can say is that if you are adding the cultured foods, it'll help you digest your wine better. But I can't give you a breakdown on the chemistry and the labs because, when you're introducing beneficial bacteria to your diet, it helps that what you're already consuming, it helps it break it down even more, and it helps it make it more digestible. So if you had a control setting where, one day you had wine without cultured foods and another day you had wine with cultured foods, maybe you have less bloating. I don't know. You know, I think try it out for yourself and see what happens.
All right. Well, we'll end with that question, and that was a very important question. Thank you for that, Danielle. Thank you for your response in this wonderful, wonderful workshop. So everyone, please try this recipe. It looks very, very simple. I definitely will try it myself as I'm getting into fermented and cultured foods myself. And you can join the newsletter. Duncan just put that in the chat. And so again, thank you for your feedback. We're always looking to improve our programming. Thank you, Priscilla. Thank you, Duncan. Enjoy the rest of this beautiful afternoon. Please check out our vendors and get to that auction before it closes at 5. And be on the standby and look out for all of our other webinars, all of our other events. And so at this, we will bid you all adieu. Thank you so much and be well.
Bye. Thank you.